Hey troops, I'm here in what is soon to be my old kitchen. We're selling this place. My old kitchen with Pastor Craig Wescoe. Oh boy, what fun. Everybody say hi, Craig.
Hi, Craig.
And Maria.
Hi, so let's do some questions. I want to know what you think would be your best inroad to promote veganism to a Christian who eats meat. For me, I'm trying to think of how I phrase this. I work on an ethical point of view. I find that works best for me. I appeal to their desire to do what's right. I appeal to that. I think what you do, and what I see you do, is you treat it more like you're a pastor, which you are. You teach Bible scripture. You deal within the contextual use of scripture to show them that veganism is the way, where I'm saying it's something, and I agree, that totally is right, but I'm trying to give the activists out there a choice to maybe in a two-step process. Like, for example, it's ethical. I say it's a Christian's job to be merciful. Being merciful implies that they are in a state of dominion. I'm going to use that word, dominion, which means they can choose not to be merciful. In other words, they can choose to eat meat. I'm not going to say it's wrong, but I'm saying as a Christian, you should want to show mercy. And that gets me through with an ethical foot in the door. And then once I get in the door, then I'll start going into a discussion about the contextual requirements of scripture to go vegan. But you go right in with the other one, and I can see how it's very successful because I've talked to many people. When I have a hard time, we just recently him and I were having a conversation with someone where my ethical way just wasn't breaking through that barrier that I wanted it to. Then you came in, slam dunk, you were giving them the context, and it worked real well. So why don't you go on a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of overlap with our approaches. I know one of your, what do you call it, your clobber question?
Yeah.
Of like, what's your clobber question?
If a Christian, it doesn't deny that a Christian can eat meat. It says if a Christian has a choice of food that comes from animal abuse or food that shows compassion, what should a Christian choose? And that works for me so often because if you're an atheist and you know nothing about the Bible stuff, if you don't read the Bible like we do, because we're geeks, we do it for fun. You guys probably have real lives. You don't need to do that. But if you don't know anything about the Bible, just knowing that allows you to have a conversation with a Christian meat eater. If you're an activist, allows you to have a Christian conversation, vegan conversation with Christian. And so that's why I like that one so much. That really deals with an ethical thing.
Yeah, and I think Cam Waters also has an interesting clobber question where he says,
I heard a question I'd never heard before.
Is there a spiritual way to kill an animal? I'll put it this way. How would Jesus kill an animal?
Wow.
How would Jesus kill an animal?
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people kind of want to avoid that question. And they say, oh yeah, Jesus, he ate fish, he ate lamb, he, condoned slaughter and all that kind of stuff. But then whenever you're like, well, how did he do it? Did he use a knife? Did he slit the animal's throat? Did he strangle the animal? Like, how did he do it? And then it sort of forces people into this view of Jesus that they know really isn't real.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, well, I can't really see Jesus murdering an animal.
Correct.
And it's like, right, that's because he wouldn't. And so I think my sort of clobber question, it's not even so much a question, but it's more of a statement of fact that a lot of Christians would acknowledge. And I just point to what is God's ideal. So people will make it about permission. They'll say, well, I have permission to eat animals. It's not a sin or it's not a salvational requirement. And I say, okay, first of all, I think you're wrong about all those things. And I can have endless debates and present endless evidence to prove that you're wrong about each of those things. But even if I grant those things for the sake of argument, I'll focus on what is God's ideal? What does God want from us? What is best in God's eyes? What does God think is the very good thing to do rather than the thing that falls short of that very good ideal? And a lot of people, they'll acknowledge that in the beginning, the Garden of Eden, before sin entered the world, when he gave us that plant-based diet and gave us that merciful dominion over the animals, and even in the future, when he restores his kingdom when Jesus' prayer, on earth as it is in heaven, that's done, and all the prophets, like Isaiah, with all the wolf and all the other animals lying down together in safety, no one's hurting or destroying. Everyone's like, yeah, that's God's ideal in the beginning, and that's God's ideal in the end. Some people, of course, push back against that, but I think a lot of people, they'll agree to that. And so then my thing is, so why don't we do God's ideal now? And I think the biggest response to that people give is, well, Jesus is going to fix it when he comes back. So then I'm like, great, now we're in a place where there's a whole bunch of evidence to suggest that we should be preparing ourselves now. So Jesus in all of his parables is all about preparing now. He says, like the parable of the virgins, some have the oil, some don't. And then, of course, the faithful and wise steward parable, where it specifically says, when the master returns, he wants you to be doing the things that he asked you to do. And so if Jesus says, when I return to establish my kingdom that you're waiting for, he wants to find us already doing his will. Well, if we know what his will is from the beginning to the end, then why aren't we doing the thing that he wants us to be doing when he returns? And so that kind of puts them in the place of, yeah, I guess when you phrase it that way, Jesus wants me to be doing his will instead of making excuses to ignore it. So that approach has worked a lot for me in just sort of reframing the person's mindset, where they'll be saying it's all about what I have permission to do. And I'll be like, that's not the right attitude. We shouldn't be focusing on what you're permitted to do. We should be focusing on what is best in God's eyes to do.
You brought up, we were having a discussion on Thanksgiving with someone, and you brought up an analogy about getting a grade, like an A+ to a D-. I thought that was really good. Could you share it with the people here?
Yeah, so along these same lines, where people who say, I have permission, or here's my justification for not being vegan, not caring about animals, I say, all right, well, what are we judged by? It says we're judged according to our works, right? And so whenever we're judged, what should we be aiming for? Should we be aiming for that D- grade that's just barely enough to get in? Because, well, if you get it, then why did you aim higher if you could have gotten in with a D-? But I say we should aim for that A+. What is the thing that's best in God's eyes? We want to get that score that he's like, you, faithful and wise steward, you've done exactly what I've asked you to do. Because if we aim for the A+ and we fall short, what do we get? We get an A, an A-, a B+. We still have plenty of room to pass. Yeah. Whereas if we aim for the D- and we fall even the slightest bit short, we fail. And so I tell someone, if your goal, which I think is a selfish motive, that they say, well, it's all about me just getting into heaven and avoiding hell or whatever. I say, well, that's the wrong mindset to begin with. We should be motivated to do God's will, regardless of what's in it for us. But even if that's your motive, even if you have a purely selfish motive, it makes sense logically to aim for the A+, so that gives you the most amount of room to still get that passing grade, even if you fall short.
You said, should we be doing what God wanted or what we're allowed to do? I want to add to that, and this really seems to get a lot of attention when I talk to a Christian mediator. I said, I opened up my Bible, which I had it with me, and I hold one page, Genesis, first chapter. You got 31 verses. It's the only chapter. There's over 1,100 chapters in the Bible, and there's only one page where God puts a seal of approval on everything and says, this is the way I want it. This is very good. Not just good. Okay, when Jews say very good, it means that's double good. All right? He goes, it's very good. That's Genesis chapter 1, and he says that right after he tells humans to be vegan. The next verse, animals to be vegan. Then he comes in and says, and it was very good. All right? It's just so obvious. Then sin enters the world, and it seems like Christians want to use sin as an opportunity to do all these bad things. Like, well, sin entered the world so we can eat animals. Well, sin entered the world, and animal eating is a result of sin. You should not be giving into sin at all. You should be going back to where God says, it's very good. This was my original intention.
Yeah, and that's basically the approach that I take with that. There is a second approach that I've had a lot of success with, and that I've seen a lot of other people have success with. Success. With thinking about their replacement son. Is the Daniel fast. So each year, Christians have something that they typically do, whether they call it Lent, whether they call it Advent, or whatever it is, just some way to give something up for God or to improve your spiritual walk or whatever it is. And whenever that comes along, I always encourage people. I say, do a Daniel fast for that 40 days or for however long. And for people who are, let's say you're the only vegan in your church, encourage other people in your church to do that. And then what I find is that it's really hard to convince somebody to change their lifestyle.
Yes.
It's much easier to get them to change what they believe about what they're already doing. So if you're asking someone, change your entire diet, which, to me and you, that's like, it's actually not that big of a deal once you actually do it. It's not that hard. But to someone who just says, well, everything I eat is an animal product except, French fries and lettuce. Yeah. So you're telling me to just only eat French fries and lettuce?
Right.
Like, no, that's not what I'm telling you to do. Just eat the vegan version of everything that you normally eat. But it's overwhelming to people.
It is.
But if they look into it and they say, okay, well, I'm going to do this vegan thing for 40 days. During that time, encourage them and show them the scriptural basis. Talk to them about the ethical component so that you're not trying to convince them to make a drastic change. You're trying to get them to change their mindset about why it's important to be doing the thing that they're already doing. And so then I find a lot of people who are, let's say, plant-based for health, then I tell them about the ethical part and about God's ideal and how God is way more pleased than you realize. That it's not just the health benefits, it's a whole bunch of spiritual benefits as well. And I find that those people are much more likely to stick with it than just someone who never even tried to do like a 40-day vegan fast.
Gotcha.
So I'd say one of the best things that I would recommend for people to do if they want to grow the number of vegans in their church is to really push hard with the Daniel fast and start like a Daniel fast group or something and really take the lead in doing that, because that's going to be one of the most successful ways to increase the amount of vegans in your church.
Sounds good. I like that. The Daniel fast, Daniel took a pledge to only eat vegetables for a certain amount of time for a certain reason. Don't want to get into the whole thing, but in case people don't know, that's why it's called the Daniel fast. And you mentioned the Christspiracy clobber question. In Christspiracy, they talk about the Daniel thing. And when they went to the website of the Daniel fast, it was funny that they were recommending animal products for part of it, which was just insane. Going back to the Christspiracy thing.
And by the way, Cam, that's how he became vegan, is because he did the Daniel fast.
Which, if you think about it,
he clobbered himself.
He did. He clobbered himself. But is that welfarist? A lot of vegans are either, you're abolitionist or you're welfarist. And if you're not an abolitionist, you're not a real vegan because you're recommending meatless Mondays or you're meeting halfway things. I don't really quite have that problem. I think you can hold an abolitionist like, no, there's absolutely no way to exploit an animal. No way, no how. But I think you can still use the welfarist actions, not because they're right, but because unfortunately in a world that is cursed with sin, sometimes you got to dance with the devil. Sometimes you have to do that, do the 40-day fast only by suggesting a 40-day fast. And then once you're knee deep into that 40 days, then you can start talking about abolitions. Once it becomes a little bit more like they say, okay, I got this 20 days done. I can understand what veganism is now. It's not such a far reach to do it permanently. But it was that welfarist way that got you into the, so, do you know what I mean? So even though I'm holding my my abolitionist view, I'm like, okay, I'll use the welfarist thing. I think God kind of did that a couple times too in the Bible.
Isn't that just called baby steps?
It is, or some people say journey, but that's another thing that vegans just hate hearing. But I think sometimes it might be the only way to go, not because it's the right way to go, but because it's the only option we got in a world that's under a curse of sin. Again, you got to dance with the devil sometimes. 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but you're still 1 step in the right direction.
Well, I don't know about dancing with the devil.
Okay, well, you know what I mean. I'm using a line from Batman.
Okay.
But
You just want to get.
I'm just saying, sometimes you have to do a little. What did I say? What was the other example? I said, if you can't find the answer in the light, sometimes you have to look in the dark.
Okay.
Okay, maybe that would be a better way than being on a Christian thing and saying dance with the devil. What is wrong with me?
Well, I would say that my approach to utilizing the vegan Daniel fast for this purpose would be definitely in alignment with the abolitionist approach. I definitely consider myself more abolitionist. I recognize value in certain welfarist approaches, but this is more of like, what inroads do we have?
Mm-hmm.
And we can jam the prophets, we could jam Genesis chapter 1, and like those are the things that I've already mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm saying there's also this inroad in Daniel chapter 1 where I think seeing what churches are more inclined to do, and they're more inclined to be accepting of this Daniel fast, where you're not sort of unloading this whole theological difference on them. It's just something they're doing for 40 days for God, giving something up. They're like, oh, one person gives up television, one person gives up animal products, another person gives up, I don't know.
Sports.
Yeah,
Whatever.
sure, whatever it is.
But isn't that a welfarist attitude? A baby steps attitude? That's my journey attitude?
So from the perspective of the person agreeing to enter into it, maybe. But from my perspective, no. It's, I'm trying to make this soil fertile. So this person who's rejecting my message, then here's a way for them to be more accepting of my message.
I like the way you phrase that. Yep.
And so if this person who, I've done 175 sermons, and when have I ever taken a non-abolitionist approach in any of my talks?
Right.
And so it's very clear that it should be to anyone who follows my work that I want people to go vegan right now, and I even call it the table of demons if you're not. And so I use very strict language about saying this is God's will and he expects all of us to do it. And when people who ignore that message, like, how do I reach those people who are ignoring that message? And I found that one of the best tools at my disposal to get those people to reconsider it is get them to do this Daniel fast.
Okay.
Because I also think there's a physiological component too. That if somebody says, well, I'm not going to eat at the table of demons for 40 days. Well, great. That's the opportunity where you're 10 times wiser, 10 times clearer of your thinking. Like, you don't have all this stuff working against you, blocking you and inhibiting you from receiving God's will. And so that's the best opportunity to be like, it's low tide. Let's get you in now. So that's kind of what I'm saying there is, let's take advantage of the trend that is super common in churches, and let's use that to our advantage.
And you mentioned they asked, how would Jesus kill an animal? You come up to a guy who knows a little bit about Jewish history, knows a little bit about Jesus, knows a little bit. And I say a little bit because they usually know just enough to get them in trouble. But what if they come back to you with a line like, how would Jesus kill an animal? Well, he would do it according to the Jewish laws. He would do it kosher. He would do it with a knife that doesn't have a nick in it. He would do it at the temple. He would do it. They would just say, the way you would assume Jesus, being a practicing Jew, would do it the way any practicing Jew would do it. And that question wouldn't even set them off at all.
Yeah. So I'd say, all right, if that's the approach that they take, I would say in Luke 6:36, Jesus says, be merciful just as your Father is merciful. So I would say, is Jesus being a hypocrite by not showing mercy to animals?
Okay, that's a good one.
Because if they're like, no, he's he's not failing to show mercy, I'll be like, well, then I'm more merciful than Jesus, because I show mercy to humans and to animals. And if Jesus is merciless toward animals and only merciful toward humans, then I'm more merciful than Jesus? Like, I mean, I don't think I am, but according to your logic, I would be.
Okay, I'm trying to think. Give me a second. I'm just trying to counter this in some way. Okay.
So first you're dancing with the devil, now you're advocating the devil.
I'm trying to. I want to make this interesting. I want to try to expand on that as much as we can, because I am in agreement. But if I wasn't, what would somebody say? Okay, if that guy was in the audience and said, how would Jesus kill an animal? And the guy up on stage said he would follow the how do you even pronounce it? Shrita? How do you say that word?
Kosher.
Not kosher. Kosher. The laws of kashrut, yeah. If he was to follow that, that's how he would do it. Bam, that's the end of it. If you would have introduced what you just said in Luke, he would have said, this guy would have said, that's not what I asked you. I asked you, how would Jesus kill it? And now you're telling me about mercy. No. How would Jesus, I'm telling you, this guy here is going to say, I'm telling you, Jesus would have followed the laws.
Yeah, and I'm saying according to Jesus' own words, then he would be a hypocrite. Is that how you view Jesus, as a hypocrite?
No, I viewed him as a practicing Jew.
A practicing Jew that would be preaching one thing and doing the opposite?
He did tell the guy, the leper, when he cured him, to go back and do the appropriate sacrifices, yes.
Well, actually, he didn't use the word sacrifice. He said, you do what is in the law according to Moses.
Okay, wouldn't that imply sacrifice?
Well, if you believe that Jesus was teaching according to the Yahwist version of the law.
Okay,
but
that's always rough, because I try not to get into the priestly or the Yahwist or those versions or understandings, because I don't think when I talk to a Christian, they've even heard such a...
Mm-hmm.
They don't know what the documentary hypothesis is. They know nothing about that. And if I go there, I'm just going to confuse them even more.
So it's hard because you're
I'm with you.
You're trying to make believe a hypothetical person what their responses are. So
okay,
I think it would differ
right.
person to person. Like if I'm talking to you, my answer is going to be different than if I'm talking to, someone else that I'm in conversation with.
Right. See, and I don't know what the person knows when I'm there, so I guess I'm already automatically go to the lowest denominator, just sometimes out of fear when I'm doing outreach. But that's good thought. Okay.
And of course, you can always transition to a different argument, because just because you started with how would Jesus kill an animal, okay, that one, maybe this person thinks there's nothing wrong with Jesus killing animals and shedding blood, and that doesn't conflict with anything. So maybe now, instead of continuing to try to push that, you just say, okay, we're going to try one of these other inroads. We're going to talk about, why did Jesus quote, I desire mercy, not sacrifice? Why is that the most quoted prophetic saying of Jesus in the Gospels?
I like that answer best, yeah. I'm trying to come up with a way to combat that now, and I'm not. I think that covers my thoughts on that. You good?
Sure, yeah. All right, so we're all in agreement that
That
everyone's going to be vegan.
Yeah, tomorrow they're going to watch this and they're going to go, Mom, Dad, Pastor, Aunt, Uncle, we're wrong. We need to be vegan.
Yeah, I don't know if you've had this. I'm sure you have. I remember one time I was doing a Cube of Truth, and I had an entire family that was zealously going to go vegan.
Really?
Yeah. Where the first I was talking to, I think, the dad and the young daughter, and they both were immediately like, yeah, this slaughterhouse footage, we don't want to participate in that. And then the daughter's like, Dad, can we clean out our fridge tonight when we get home and take out all the animal products?
Isn't that great?
And she said, when I grow up, I want to be an animal rights activist. And I said, you don't have to wait till you grow up. You can do that today. And then the brother came by and he's like, yeah, let's all go vegan, Dad. And like the whole family was like, we're going to go vegan tonight. And we're excited about cleaning out our fridge, and we're going to start going shopping and, figure out all the vegan food. I was like, imagine if every time we did outreach, it was like this.
Even if you could get just one a month like that, it would just be so refreshing. Rather than Leviticus says we can kill animals. It's just... It is nice when it happens. It's rare, unfortunately. It's unfortunate that it's rare a Christian picks up on being compassionate to animals. I just don't get that. But I was there myself for 40 years. What can I say?
Like if you push hard enough and you push in all the different directions, you'll find where deep down they really do care. And I'm optimistic. I think that as veganism becomes more normalized, I think more Christians especially will start to make that connection. And so, I don't know. We'll see.
I think you're right. I think the more normalized it becomes, which is why, even though it looks like we're obnoxious when we're posting pictures of our food on Instagram, or we're wearing t-shirts that say vegan, is it obnoxious? Yeah, but it's still breaking down the walls. It's still little by little making veganism more common. I try not to use the word normal because there's nothing abnormal about it.
Well, I've never eaten anything common or unclean, so I don't eat vegan food.
Yes, Peter. That's another line from the Book of Acts, which nobody out there will get. All right, we're done with this one. Let's go eat some leftover pizza.
Okay, so while you guys were chatting and I was just sitting here watching you guys chit chat again, I was just on my Google search here and I just was like seeing what other people would comment about Jesus not eating meat or animals or hurting animals in general. And there's more stuff on here about hurting animals as well. And I was just found a comment that somebody said about the Last Supper and Passover meal. And it says, if Christ strictly followed Passover tradition, lamb would be expected, but it is conspicuously absent in the gospel accounts. Instead, he offers bread as his flesh and wine as his blood, symbolically replacing the traditional sacrificial lamb. This could indicate a shift away from animal sacrifice and consumption.
It sounds like he's been watching your channel.
Yeah, there's a few things that I think are worth mentioning. Yes, you're correct. When they mention the food items, lamb is not mentioned. And if lamb were part of the meal, if Jesus is representing himself as being the Lamb of God that's slain on Passover, wouldn't it make more sense to use the lamb rather than the bread to represent his body?
Yeah.
So that, to me, indicates that lamb probably wasn't present.
Mm-hmm.
And another compelling piece of evidence is that in John's gospel, it says this was the preparation day for the Passover, and that Jesus was slain, he was crucified, along with the lambs on the Passover, when they were before the meal would have been eaten. So the fact that Mark calls it a Passover, but John is the one that tends to specify the more details, that it was not the Passover, it was the preparation for the Passover. And, just like when he says the guy who got his ear sliced off, his name was Malchus. Well, he's the only one who mentions the name. Like, John very often gives more detail than everyone else. And so the fact that everyone else just says Passover, well, the other Gospels also say unleavened bread and Passover are the same. They use them interchangeably because they're more vague, whereas John is more specific about things. So I think it makes more sense that Jesus, as the Passover lamb that's slain, would have been on that same preparation day. So that meal wouldn't have been even a Passover meal.
Yeah.
So that's another reason why there wouldn't be lamb at that meal. But then a third compelling reason, which for me is the most compelling reason, Jesus specifically discusses by name the Pharisees, who are in control of the synagogues. They're the rabbis, the teachers of the law. And then he also mentions the Sadducees, who are the priests in the temple, who get all the money for animal sacrifices and perform all the sacrificial rituals in the temple. So those are two different groups within Judaism in his time. And he's very critical of both of those groups, right, throughout the Gospels. When it comes to the Essenes, that's the other group of Jews in Jesus' time that are mentioned by Josephus, they're mentioned by the historical sources. We now have evidence with like the Dead Sea Scrolls, how prevalent they were. So there was another third form of Judaism in existence in Jesus' time. Jesus never says a single negative thing about the Essenes in any of our Gospels.
I was about to read something about
It's
the Essenes.
all about the Pharisees and the Sadducees doing things wrong, but not the Essenes. And when we compare the Essene way of life to the way of life that Jesus teaches his apostles throughout the book of Acts, they lived communally, they lived as the poor ones. Luke says, blessed are the poor ones in the Beatitudes. There's the Ebionim, that's another name for these Essenes. And so all of the characteristics of how the Essenes lived were very much in alignment with what Jesus taught his apostles to do. So if you had to guess which group was Jesus most likely closely associated with, it would by far be the Essenes, right, over the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Well, all the evidence that we have specifically says the Essenes opposed the sacrificial system. They did not sacrifice animals because they believed it was against the will of God to do so. So that's why in the Essene version of these feast days, these Moedim, we have very concrete historical evidence that they did not sacrifice a lamb and eat it on Passover. And so for Jesus and his apostles to be eating meals where the lamb is not mentioned, and clearly his group is much more in alignment with that group than with the Pharisees or the Sadducees, I think the evidence is overwhelmingly compelling that there was no lamb being eaten by Jesus and the apostles.
This guy did good then, because he went on to it says, similar to what you just said, he said in answering this other person's question, that he says the Nazarene and Essene connection, which is the Essenes and Nazarenes, known for their strict purity laws, avoided meat and blood. If Jesus was part of these traditions, as some evidence suggests, he would have followed their dietary practices.
I find another helpful thing is they also avoided another very common thing at the time, which was slavery. Now, when I mentioned that, along with abstaining from eating flesh products, it tends to, when I'm talking to a Christian, it tends to make it a little bit more acceptable.
The principle of nonviolence is next. Christ's message was centered on love, mercy, and nonviolence. If he opposed unnecessary suffering, it follows that he would avoid eating animals, especially if alternatives were available. But people's suffering is just as important.
What's great about that is also that not only did they abstain from flesh products, they didn't keep slaves because they thought that was wrong. One of the nice things that it points out is that not every group of Judaism believed the exact same things. There were little small differences. Everybody thinks every Jew had to believe specifically the same thing. There were different variations, kind of in the same way that, there's a difference between Protestants and Baptists. I mean, they're both Christian. It's just there might be a little bit of difference. There were differences like that in Judaism too.
And you mentioned the nonviolence. Well, Jesus, I think, in the most memorable act against violence is when he goes into the temple and disrupts it and flips over their tables.
He did.
And he says, "Get these things out of here. You made my father's house a den of violence." The word peretz, when he's quoting Jeremiah chapter 7, verse 7:11, I think.
Yeah, there he I'm thinking the lion pen. The lion pen is chapter 8. Yeah, so I'm like, why is my brain saying...
Yeah, 7:22 is he didn't ever ask for animal sacrifices. But I think 7:11 is where he quotes Jeremiah using that term peretz, where he said which is sometimes translated thieves, but really it's violent ones.
And there's a difference.
He's calling them a den of violence.
Like when you think of a thief, I mean, I'll go back to more Batman references. Think of Catwoman. She doesn't kill people. She sneaks in like a cat, steals stuff and sneaks out. That's a thief. A violent one is somebody who's going to come in with a gun, shoot you and take your money. He's still a thief, but he's a violent thief. There's a difference. And that's why there's a difference in those words between peretz and just a plain, what's the word for thief? I don't forget what it is. But you get the idea.
Yeah. So, yeah, and I mean, the whole idea of somebody being that violent one.
The violent thief, and not just being a robber or a violent thief and not a Catwoman. There we go. You're going to hate my life.
And the Good Samaritan story is based on this as well, where it doesn't say the person was left without their wallet, right? It says they were left in need of medical attention. And that's because they were beaten. Thieves, had attacked them. And so when I love Jesus's response, where he tells that story and he's like, which one of them showed mercy to the victim? And they said, well, the one that helped him. He's like, yes, you go and do likewise. So the one who showed mercy is the one that Jesus wants us to emulate. So he wants us to show that mercy toward the victims of violence. Well, he's doing that by example, by overturning the tables and liberating the animals and calling out this den of violence, and says, this isn't what my Father's house is supposed to be for. It's supposed to be a house of prayer, not a den of violence toward animals.
And a prayer for all nations. It was meant for even people of different faiths to come and pray with them. Love it.
There was another, I never heard this one before. I mean, I heard it before, but I never heard about the possible misinterpreted. But John the Baptist and James, it says John the Baptist is often interpreted as eating locusts, but the Greek akrides could also mean carob pods, aligning with the vegetarian diet. Likewise, of course, James, his brother, it says there's historical sources that he was a strict vegetarian, which most likely means Jesus was as well.
Yeah.
But
In fact, both those things are true.
Yeah.
And there's also historical evidence that all the apostles were vegan.
Mm-hmm.
It says in Proof of the Gospel 3.5 by Eusebius, that's where he says all of the apostles abstained from eating animal flesh.
Mm-hmm.
And there's attestations of individually with James and with Thomas and with Peter, with Mary, with John. So each of them individually and all of them collectively.
Yeah. The other people's comments crack me up. I was just reading the smart guys' answers.
And just that specific thing about the locusts, it's acris and ecris.
Mm-hmm.
Those
Oh,
are the
acris.
two words. And so the idea is that they were getting that from an earlier Hebrew source.
Oh.
And so when they translated into Greek, those acris and ecris, those are Greek terms.
Mm-hmm.
And so since they're so similar in Greek, but then in the underlying Hebrew source, it wouldn't have been the same or similar terms. And so that's why they're saying that it was most likely a translational issue when it was using like some Hebrew Matthew into the Greek version that might have come about.
Right.
I have a hard time with a lot of pastors even willing to look at the Hebrew Matthew.
Because most of them aren't trained in history, they're just trained in the tradition and the theology.
What was the first? Shem Tov, you know that version? That was the first time I read.
Oh, it says Jesus ate fish in front of his disciples after the resurrection?
That's Luke 24, 42, and 43.
That's
Yeah.
when he appeared in the locker room.
Yeah. It says, however, this could be interpreted or mistranslation. Or misinterpreted or a mistranslation. I don't know.
There's also, I often ask people, I say, okay, which manuscript are you going with there?
Oh, there you go.
Because if you have a study Bible, there should be a footnote for that passage where it'll say half the manuscripts say that they gave him fish, and half the manuscripts say that it was fish and honeycomb. So my question is, well, clearly half the manuscripts were changed, at least half of them, because half say one thing, half say another thing. But then my question is, which one is the earlier one? And if it was the fish and honeycomb, well, in the next verse it says, and he ate it in their presence.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the it could refer to the
Honeycomb.
not to the fish.
That makes sense.
And so you kind of have to commit to the version that only says fish in order to have that proof that it was eating fish that Jesus did.
And then, of course, I had two more viewpoints on that.
Does that mean it's okay to eat honey?
Well, that was also meant date paste.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
It's
true.
actually
I could see that.
That is also mistranslation.
Yeah.
But if you got if
Date
you're
paste,
an
that makes sense.
activist and you're doing outreach to a Christian who's not going to let go of it being honey, think about the way honey was gathered in those
Back then
days.
it was so different.
It wasn't.
It's out of a lion's stomach, right?
There you go.
It's part of the scripture.
Yeah, it's not like today. It's not like
But
these days.
if there was,
We also didn't have a problem with a lack of bees in the world.
but the
That's none of our business.
oh man, get that joke.
Sorry, go ahead.
I forgot what I was gonna say.
I said you had 2 points about the
Yeah. I try to work within the idea that not saying that when I'm doing activism and I'm talking to a Christian who's just not going to let go of the idea of honey, like no, it had to be honey. Okay, how do you work with that? I would say they would place a bowl underneath a bee's
They just
nest.
catch
If
leaking
something
honey.
dripped out, that was their access to it. It's not like they raised them in farms with the purpose of cutting off the
I also
queen's
don't
wings
think they had the
and doing
material
things
to
they do
avoid
today.
stings.
So
Smoking.
is it
Smoking.
Is it vegan? No, but it's pretty much harmless. The second thing I would say is, let's look at the situation that was going on at the time. When Jesus appeared in the locked room, why were they in a locked room? These disciples just saw their Lord get crucified. They were scared.
Weren't they hiding?
Yeah, they
Yeah,
thought they were next.
I remember that, yeah.
So here they are. Think of it, band on the run.
They're hiding, yeah.
They're kind of scared. The door is locked. Jesus appears.
I know.
So
In a
they're
locked room.
thinking Jesus is dead and now he's here and he's walking through walls. He's a ghost. And Jesus saying, I'm not a ghost. Here, stick your hands in me. I'm not a ghost. Check me out. And they're like, no, you're still a ghost. And he's like, I'm not. He knew the custom of the time was ghosts are not physical. They wouldn't. He's like, no, it's me, flesh and blood. I'm your buddy. I walked with you. You know me. And they're like, no, you're a ghost. And he's like, fine. Can ghosts eat? And they're like, no. He's like, what have you got to eat? Give it to me. If they would have had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, he would have ate it. So if it was a fish, he ate it. Was he putting down a formula saying, yes, it's okay for everybody to do this? No. He's saying, in the immediate sense, I need to prove to you that I am the same flesh and blood Jesus that was crucified. So whatever you got to eat, I'll eat it. I think that would be another way to argue it.
Yeah. And
it's a way to at least bring the conversation still into a vegan direction if you've got a Christian that just won't let go.
Okay.
So it's kind
I'm
of
just
like a
gonna-
halfway point between our points of view, I think.
I don't believe this, but I just want to bring something up. Is it possible that they didn't consider fish meat back then and they were maybe just pescatarian?
I think they're in the Mediterranean world, where if they're living in like fishing villages, I think that tends to be the argument that people use. I know that some vegan Christians have tried doing that, especially from the more traditionalist perspective, where they say, well, that was a thing in their time, and Jesus was trying to reach his fisherman audience where they are, and then like he's calling us toward a higher ideal. I think that's possible. I think the totality of the evidence suggests that that's probably not the case, because it does describe Jesus as being like Jesus the Nazarene.
Right.
And there's all this clear attestations that the Nazarenes didn't eat any animal flesh, even fish. And so I think the preponderance of the evidence would suggest that that's probably not what was happening, but I think that's still probably a better reading than Jesus convinced all of his apostles and all of his followers that, now we're all going to eat pig flesh.
Yeah.
And that's the traditional view. So I think, if somebody holds that view, I'm like, all right, at least that's better than what most people assume.
I never even thought about that, but I figured you'd probably get some people saying that. Because now I've just heard the fish. There's so much fish in the Bible.
There is a lot.
So I was just curious.
It's also the
Oh,
thought
maybe he's
that
pescatarian.
they were very poor. They did not have money. And the only place food was free, if food was growing on land, it probably belonged to someone. It was farmed. The only food they would get would be free and accessible was in the Sea of Galilee. Did they? I don't believe it, but that would be part of the argument that they would make. It wasn't a matter because they were laying down formula for feeding yourself forever. It was a starvation. It was an issue of survival.
Yeah.
I don't like that one much. It's usable, but I don't like that argument much.
No, it's
Again, when the
like,
reason
what else
there's
is
so,
there to eat?
there-
Of
it's
sustenance
okay.
if there's not a lot of food that's grown.
Yeah, but free
Just
food.
like the Eskimos, all they have up there to eat are seals.
And if it's free and you're surviving, it is. And some of those arguments I don't like. Again, I make them because I use them, but what's going to work really depends on who you're speaking to. Everybody comes into the scripture with their own bias, their own understanding of culture, their own understanding of what's right and wrong. And it's hard to, there's just not one answer that's going to work for all forms, even if it's the right answer.
But
Sometimes
it's always kids that bring it up. This whole thread was brought
Yeah.
up because someone's kid said, "What would Jesus do?"
So there's also Justin Martyr in the middle of the 2nd century. He does a very interesting thing. He distinguishes between aquatic plants and terrestrial plants in his writings. And that's not something that we see from a lot of later writers. And so if the earliest disciples of Jesus are predominantly Hebrew and Aramaic speakers. And we don't get this shift into Greek until almost a century later, and then it later becomes Latin as the language of the church. Then that means a lot of these earliest concepts had to be translated from Hebrew Aramaic into Greek. And if one of our earliest Greek writers is distinguishing between aquatic plants and terrestrial plants as both being things that they're consuming, well, maybe there's some sort of, maybe that plays into this mistranslation of, where all these fishy passages, as I call them. Why is fish so prevalent? Because one of the trends that we see is expansions of texts. And so they'll start sort of embellishing stories. So you compare Mark with Matthew, where Mark gives like a simple version, then Matthew expands on it. And we see the same thing with like Luke, who's the Gospel of Luke says, I'm using sources that were passed down to me. Then we look at some of those sources and they, it's like there's these expanded accounts. And so if somebody says, oh yeah, they're eating this opsarion or whatever, they say, oh, that must be fish because that's like aquatic something. And then they say, oh, well, it must have been this net full of fish or this these swimming creatures, whatnot.
Big things.
But it might have just been aquatic plants. And so they're expanding the story based on a misunderstanding of what those aquatic plants were. And so I think people say like the seaweed bread or something like that.
And that would be nutritious too. Wow. That's so interesting.
It's not like when Luke or some of these apostles wrote these things, they were writing it down on the spot as things were happening. Okay, these are recollections or stories collected from other people at the time. So there's reasons to understand why mistakes like that exist. And I can see how it grew into like, oh, it's always fish. And like you said, in a fishing community, that would be more impressive to a bunch of fishermen.
That one question.
So I can see why it would stick.
That one question just got turned into 22 minutes of conversation.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Okay.
But I mean, this isn't even me as a source critic saying this. Like, you just look at the first 4 verses of the Gospel of Luke. The author says, I'm somebody who has read all of the literature on this topic, and I'm compiling it for you, O excellent Theophilus, into one compilation narrative. So the author says, essentially,
I wasn't there. I don't know this.
Right. Like I'm not an eyewitness account. I'm someone who is compiling accounts together. And so I think it's a little fishy that of the 4 Gospels in our Bible, the only one that records this event of Jesus eating fish to prove the resurrection is Luke. It's not in Mark, it's not in Matthew, it's not in John. So the one of the 4 that specifically says, I didn't come up with this myself, I'm using sources, is the only one we have. So what source were you using, author of the Gospel of Luke?
And who was that, you think? This was something he taught me just the other day, and I'm like, I never knew that.
What?
It's the Gospel of Marcion is the only 2nd century gospel that has that account. And he clearly uses that gospel quite extensively. And so if we want to say, I believe that Jesus ate fish to prove the resurrection, then literally the only account that even claims to be an eyewitness is the Gospel of Marcion for that story.
And if you guys don't know who Marcion is, he just isn't the most favorable looked upon guy in the Bible.
Yeah, by the end of the 2nd century onward, everybody calls him a heretic and says we shouldn't listen to anything he says. Well, all right, then let's start with that verse.
Yeah.
Okay. Now we can go eat leftovers.
Now we can go eat more leftovers, yes, dear.
Unless you gave them all to the homeless people.